in teams, whatever job we do, and whatever level we are in the organisation. And in the end, your performance will always depend on your ability to work successfully with other people. There's an assumption that you should know how to be a good team player, but actually, the more you look into understanding teamwork, the more tricky and interesting it becomes. I'm Chris, and I've been working with teams and running off-site team days for about 20 years now. In some cases, it's a team that wants to go from good to great. Sometimes it's a team with terrible problems. But in all the cases, it's amazing how much can be changed in just a day. Sometimes everyone finds different things that they can do to make the team better. Sometimes there's a really simple answer to what's blocking their ability to work together. And I've put everything I've learnt about teams into this course, so it contains a whole lot of practical ideas to help you to become a great team player, which will help both you and maybe also your organisation to be more successful. So let's make you into a great team player and in turn make your team great. I received a really interesting email from someone who's using this course with their whole team. And what they do is each week they pick one video and all discuss it as a group. And I think this is particularly brilliant because it's easy to watch these videos and think, oh yeah, I already do that. Oh yes, I'm great at that and I never do those bad things. But how do you know? Is it possible that sometimes you aren't as helpful as you think, or that your moods do vary more than you realise? And maybe some of the others in the team think that you're hard to talk to, or that you don't thank them enough, and you have no idea. And whether they're right, or it's just their perception that is mistaken in some way, almost doesn't matter. The problem is there, and could probably be easily fixed if you only discussed it and agreed some plans for working together better. So my suggestion is that at the very least, you ask your colleagues for feedback. How am I doing in these areas that are discussed on this course? And ideally, you would suggest to your team that you all meet up and discuss the contents of this course. Perhaps watch the video together and then discuss it afterwards. Imagine what an amazing team you could end up with if everyone bought into doing everything that we cover. Good luck, you can do it. To be honest, I don't think of myself as a natural team player. I'm certainly not very good at following instructions, and I'm not very good at sharing tasks. But I am good at pointing out snags in the plan, or taking unpopular decisions, or challenging others who aren't contributing to the team. And these are all things that are needed in a team. And the person who just blends in and does whatever their colleagues want is also not really a perfect team player either. Because although they're great at supporting and sharing, they probably won't do the things like taking unpopular decisions. So a team player has to do lots of things, almost self-contradictory things, like supporting each other but also challenging each other. And we can't possibly all be naturals at doing all of them. In fact, nobody can do everything, but a team can cover every skill that's needed. Difficult tasks need a whole variety of skills, and a team is really the only way to get something difficult done. Partly this is about specialists. You might need a quarterback, some receivers, maybe a kicker who only comes on for a couple of minutes in the whole match but does something that nobody else can do, etc. But teams are also about helping each other with our weaknesses, so we all cover each other's weak points, and then the team as a whole doesn't suffer. We all get a better result if we're in a team. The other reason we need teamwork is quite simply because it makes us happy. We're pack animals who don't like to be alone for too long. We need friends and the emotional support of others. And we like to feel that we are within a group of like-minded people, all moving forward together. We like to belong, to be in a tribe. Even supporting a football team is part of this pack instinct that we all have and we all need to satisfy. So we're loyal to our family, our town, our football team, our employer maybe, and our country, because we're basically team animals. But the trouble is that teams are also a bit of a nightmare. Everyone has their own personality, and the people who we need because they're different to us are often the people that we find difficult or even dislike because we don't really understand them. So we want to be in a team, we need to be in a team, and yet we don't always like being in a team. And that's what this course is about. Teams are unavoidable, often difficult, but also important and potentially enjoyable. So how can we make the best of this contradictory situation? Maybe the biggest reason why we need teams is that nobody's perfect. You can't do everything yourself because there's bound to be something that you're bad at. Maybe it's creativity or finishing things off or confronting scary people or planning a long way ahead, for example. But whatever it is, it seems that the way we're made is that we're all good at some things and we're all bad at other things, which I think is rather great. It makes life interesting, and it means that whatever the job is, there will be someone who's good at it and likes doing it. But it does mean that in a team, we need to be tolerant of the failings of others. Just because you find making decisions easy doesn't mean that everyone else will, and it's unfair to give them a hard time about it. In fact, be glad that they find it hard, because then it gives you a chance to shine. Maybe they aren't very good at the detail and you are, and that's great. Don't waste effort criticizing them or making them feel bad. It's not going to be easy to change them. Just embrace the fact that in a team, everyone's different, and you have your role that the others can't do. Nobody's perfect, but a team can be. But remember, although teams can be perfect, they usually aren't. And as we'll see, it's quite hard to design a perfect team, even if you have the power to. Often we just inherit a bunch of people and it's random chance. Or we pick people we like because they're similar to us, and that's not going to end well. But at least with a team, we have a chance of making it work well. And the starting point is to make allowances for the fact that other people are sometimes bad at things that we find obvious or easy. Who do you know that has faults that annoy you? And is it possible to turn this around and think about the things that they're good at instead? And can you also turn that irritation with their faults into feeling good about the fact that you can easily do the things that they find difficult? One of the roles of a team player is to help the leader to be great. And one of the key aspects of a great leader is vision, to provide a vision that excites the team. We're naturally pack animals who are also goal-seeking animals. We love to have a quest, and we're united by having a quest together. We forget all our petty differences when we know where we're going, and we feel that we're moving forwards on our quest together. So one of the most important jobs of the leader is to choose and then show us the goal that we're going to achieve together. whether it's expanding into South America or increasing the amount of recycling that we're doing or saving money or launching an amazing new product. Even if you're not the top leader of the organisation, but you manage just a small part of it, you still need to have a vision for your part. How can your department be great? How can it move a little bit closer towards greatness this year? And as a member of a team, you can still contribute to the ideas of how the team can be great. It doesn't have to all come from your boss. And it's not good enough just to sit there and complain that your boss hasn't generated an exciting enough vision. You're in the team too, remember. You can also encourage the boss to articulate the vision. Often, because they're busy or haven't really thought about the importance of it, they don't tell the team what the plan is, or at least not what the bigger picture is, only what they think you need to know for your bit. So we do need to know where we fit into the bigger picture in order to have a real sense of purpose. And you can help everyone in the team by asking your boss about this. So I'd like you to ask yourself, how clearly do you see where your team is going at the moment? Have you asked your boss about the vision for the team? And finally, do you have any of your own suggestions about where the team should be going? Lots of things need to be done within a successful team, and they fall into 4 main areas. First, management functions. Someone in the team needs to organise things, to think longer term, etc. Second, people functions. Obviously, it's a team, so the people need to be looked after. Then third, creativity functions. If the team's got to achieve something new, then these are important. And finally, fourth, someone's got to get on and actually do that work. And by the way, you can download a list of the following team functions from the exercise files that go with this course. So we've got 4 areas, and within each of the areas, there are 3 main roles that I've identified. Within the management area, there are 3 roles that need to be fulfilled by someone in the team. And the first one is the organizer of people and of ideas, somebody who's going to keep everything neat and tidy. The second management role is the driver. This is the person who's pushing for speed and results, who's thinking about time and making sure we meet those deadlines. You could see that that could be a different type of person from the organizer. The third management role is the visionary. This is maybe a bit of a detached thinker type person. They have a longer-term strategic view. So those are the 3 management roles. And just to stress that all 3 of these could be done by the same person if they were a really exceptional leader, or perhaps by 2 or 3 different people in the team. How many of these 3 does your boss do? And how many are you naturally inclined to do? Next, we come to the 3 people roles. The first one of these is the networker. This is the person who loves meeting new people and collecting new ideas. Probably a talkative person, maybe not that organised, but great for exploring new ideas. The second people role is the carer. Perhaps an observant, sensitive, maybe relatively quiet person. They're the ones who see the good in other people's ideas and say, yeah, Tony's come up with a really good idea there. I think we should listen to him about that. Or, you haven't said much, Diane. Are you okay? Thirdly, you've got the inspirer, who generates motivation, excitement, and sometimes even fun. Imagine a team without that. Now moving on to my third category, creativity and problem solving. And again, I think there are 3 roles to be fulfilled within this area. The first one is the creative type. This is the person who generates completely new ideas from somewhere within their mind. I really admire people who can do this. Second, you have the opposer. This is the devil's advocate who says, but what if that isn't right? How do we know it's right? And who's good at spotting flaws in the plan and saying so. Not always popular, but very useful. And then third is the judge, whose role is to assess the options and select the best answer. and to make sure that one option does get selected, that we home in on a plan rather than just coming up with more and more ideas. And then finally, the 3 work roles. And the first of the work roles is the detail person who makes sure that everything's exactly right. A very important role. Somebody has to cover that. The second of the work roles is the systems thinker. This is the detached type person who stands back and organises the processes and the way we're working and sets it up so that everything's going to run smoothly. And the final one of my 12 roles I've called the stayer. This is the person who's really good with those routine, repetitive tasks. They're the patient one. They've got staying power to keep just banging away at that one task. They don't get the glory, but they're really important in any team. Now, of course, you probably won't have a team as large as 12, so you'll each need to do several of the roles that I've been listing. So there's a copy of this in your exercise files for you to download. Have a look at the list and think about which ones you are good at. And also think about what are the gaps in your current team. And remember that if there is a gap, there are really only 2 options. Either somebody in the team has got to make the effort to cover that gap, and it may not be their first choice of what they would naturally want to do, but someone's got to cover that gap. Or you need to pull somebody in, recruit a new person or borrow someone from another department to join that team to naturally fill that gap. When are you at your best during a team project? At the start, in the middle, or near the end? You might have certain abilities or skills that aren't needed all the time. The idea is to know what your strengths are at all phases of a project. For example, creative people are great at the start of a project, but the last thing you want is someone having more ideas just when you've nearly finished. Ideally, that creative person would switch off their creativity once the plan has been agreed, and then use a different part of their skill set, maybe helping with the work of implementation or going into quality control mode. The main phases of a team task or project are as follows. First is the direction setting phase, when the best contributions are to suggest big, long-term goals, to set up processes and to assign roles to people. Who's going to do what? How much planning time should we have? That kind of thing. Then there's the planning phase, where the main tasks to be done are to generate ideas, assess the quality of those ideas, and get the ideas boiled down to one plan. How can you contribute to this? Are you best at generating ideas or best at evaluating them for how feasible they are? Then comes the briefing others phase, because not everyone was in on the planning. So everyone on the team needs to know what the plan is. This phase might involve presenting, explaining one-to-one, delegating out parts of the task, and checking that people are okay with the plan. Then we come to the action phase, where you carry out the plan. All the idea generation is now behind us, and the team members are now doing their agreed share of the work, which could involve solving problems along the way, making sure that quality is maintained, attention to detail, and being a stayer when the work gets tough. Also at this stage, someone in the team needs to attend to the people functions, which include helping others, mediating in disputes, and in some cases, providing a bit of humour. And then finally, we come to the finishing of the project. This involves getting all the details finished off, making sure that every I is dotted, every T crossed, and then maybe organising a review where we learn from what happened and document it for next time. So I want you to think about how you can be a great contributor throughout every team project that you're involved in. Which of the stages are you less naturally good at? And for those ones, could you maybe work out a role for yourself and therefore enable yourself to contribute better during that phase? Before a team can work well together, even if it's got the perfect mix of people, it needs to have the right physical environment where we can truly feel like a team. Are there communal areas and times when people are allowed or even encouraged to go there? Do the communal areas make people feel valued by providing free tea and coffee, maybe even fruit or snacks? Are there enough meetings, but not too many? And are they well run? Are there any fun events which make people talk to and really get to know each other? Setting up this environment stuff is really the boss's job, but any team member can suggest activities that will make this happen. Things like games, competitions, short trips, celebrations of any kind, from birthdays and births of colleagues' babies to big orders received and projects being completed. One place I visited recently has a thought of the day written up on a whiteboard, and anyone who has a good one can write it up there. I told them I thought it was a great idea, and they surprised me by asking if I'd like to write up the day's thought, and I felt really honoured, actually. By the way, I just put "be yourself." That was the best I could come up with, but I thought it was a good one. The thought of the day board is just a small thing, but it's fun, and it's also another team communication activity. So the question is, can you encourage more of these environmental things? Can you suggest to your team members, or maybe to your boss, that you meet every week, that you have meals together every now and then, or that you work nearer to each other? Is there anything else that will make your working area feel more fun and more teamy? What do you suppose is the biggest problem in any organisation and in most teams? When I ask this, I always get the same answer: communication. By definition, a team is a group of people who communicate with each other well. And failure to communicate is a huge cause of problems and of stress and inability to achieve tasks in teams. It's really easy to assume that the others know what you know. I sometimes run team improvement days when we all go off-site and think about how to work together more effectively. One of the exercises I sometimes use involves each person being given part of the information needed to solve a puzzle. And amazingly, they nearly always get stuck for ages. And then someone suddenly reveals a key bit of the information. And all the others go, "What? Why didn't you tell us about that before?" There they were, saying, "If only we knew the price of kangaroos." And one of the team is sitting there with a little card saying, "Kangaroos cost $50, and he doesn't say anything. Incredible. A common real-life version of this is when one of the team, possibly one of the more quiet, cautious thinking types, has a worry about the plan that they've all agreed. This person thinks that part of the plan might go wrong, but they don't say anything. And then later, when inevitably it has gone wrong, they might quietly say, "I knew it wouldn't work." "Oh, great, now you tell us." So the rule is, speak up if you have useful information. And speak up if you've spotted a flaw in the plan, even if last time you were accused of being negative. And also, speak up if you're unclear. If you didn't quite catch part of the instructions, or you don't understand the plan, then it's your duty as a team member to say so. Nobody else is going to know that you're stuck, so you have to speak up. There have been times when I've spoken up and said I didn't understand part of the plan, and afterwards everybody else said, "We didn't understand it either." So, if in doubt, you should say so. And finally, you should ask for help when you need it. It's very tempting to keep quiet and hope that you can catch back up. But if you're having a problem, you should confess it and ask for help as soon as possible, before it gets any worse and affects the rest of the team. If the others in the team aren't supportive, then that's a failure by them, not by you. We all have things that we're not so good at and times when we need help. And the whole point of a good team is that you can ask for help and it will be given. So make sure that you always speak up in the 4 situations: when you have useful information, when you've spotted a potential problem with the plan, when you're unclear about the plan, and when you need help. Have you noticed how, if you have dinner with more than about 5 people, the conversation tends to fragment into smaller subgroups of a more optimum size, maybe 2 or 3? It's the same with teams at work. With large teams, it gets really difficult for everyone to listen to everyone else, and almost impossible for decisions to be agreed. The more people you have, the more scope there is for misunderstandings, disagreements, and gaps and overlaps in who's doing what. This was demonstrated by Max Ringelmann 100 years ago when he tested people pulling on a rope in a tug of war. He found that if you have a team of people, they all pull with less effort than you get from one person pulling on their own. It's known as the Ringelmann effect, and it says that individual productivity tends to decrease as group size increases. This is partly due to communication and coordination problems leading to less efficient work, and partly due to what he called social loafing, the fact that people can increasingly rely on everyone else doing the work and nobody will know. In a team of 10, you can get away with doing almost nothing, but in a team of 2 or 3, it's going to show. So teams of 2 or 3 are more productive than teams of 6 or 7. And with more than that, you gain almost nothing from adding an extra person. Basically, it's better to subdivide teams down if you can. The research of Meredith Belbin, probably the world authority on teams, concluded that the best size of team for solving problems is 4. Smaller than that, and you don't get as many ideas. Larger than that, you start getting these communication inefficiencies. After we've made the team the optimum size, the next thing to keep an eye on is how the skills and roles of the team members fit together. The pieces will never fit together perfectly, and the sizes of the pieces will vary, so it's almost impossible to get fairness when the work gets divided up. And this gets worse when you have different types of job coming along. So sometimes there will be lots of work for the detail person or the creative person, and other times very little. So they may swing from overloaded to bored. And I think this is just built into the nature of teams, but it does need to be monitored and managed. I think there are 5 things you can do in order to make the best of this difficult situation. Number 1 is always keep the team to the smallest size it can be. Number 2 is to have regular meetings where you all tell each other what you're working on. Number 3 is make sure that each person has measurable accountability for some part of the task so that they can't hide. Number 4 is to monitor how busy each person is and try to redistribute the work to keep it fair. And number 5, train people for several skills as much as possible so they can cover for each other when relative workloads vary. So how big is your team? And have you noticed these communication inefficiencies happening? Could you reduce the size of the team or subdivide it? And do you have regular meetings? Could there be clearer accountability for each person? And have you got as much multi-skilling as possible for everyone in your team? Conflict is going to be inevitable with different types of people in a team. A good team, with plenty of variety between the members, is almost doomed in this respect. The person who creates new ideas is never going to like the one who finds the flaw in plans. And the caring person is never really going to like the pushy one. So the thing is to realise that it's going to happen and not be too fazed by it. Just try to channel that energy in a constructive direction. For example, if you've got several dominant people in a team, try to give them their own areas of control. Look out for the not quite as dominant ones switching off because they can't be in charge. And instead of letting their talents go to waste, find or suggest other roles for them. Most naturally dominant people can be the boss, but can also do lots of other things once they realise that they aren't going to be the boss this time. And actually, maybe being the boss is not the most fun thing to be doing in the team anyway. A small but ridiculous example of this. When I travel on the subway with a group of people, it will probably be me that plans the route. But occasionally there's someone else that says, no, you don't want to take the Northern Line, you want to take the Central Line and cut across from the East. And my reaction is to avoid any conflict and opt out and say, OK then, whatever you think. And then I just sit there on the train looking at my watch occasionally and thinking, if we'd taken my route, we would have been there by now. So now, as a team member, I'm not contributing at all to the mission. In fact, I'm positively hoping that it all goes wrong so I can prove that my way was better. Much more productive would be to put me in charge of tickets or luggage safety or something, so that I can contribute to some part of the mission that I can feel is my own. Conflicts between people aren't personal, they're just structural. They're built in from the mix of personalities. So if we can rise above them and see the bigger picture, we can focus on the goal, which is better for everyone. So what's your pet conflict? What annoys you when other people do it? And how do you usually respond? For example, does it annoy you when people disagree with your suggested plan? Or when people slow the process down by asking everyone else if they're happy with the plan? Or maybe it upsets you when someone's too dominant or talks too much. Could you respond in a more constructive way? Maybe take disagreement with your plan as a way to improve it. Take the slowing down as actually a good idea, not to rush into things. And maybe in the case of the dominant person, it could be your role to suggest that the process could be improved and that some other people could have a say. It's quite likely that the others in the team are all thinking the same thing, but nobody has said it. And perhaps more difficult, are there people in your team who you can arbitrate between and influence them into contributing more effectively, rather than just fighting with each other? Maybe you can suggest to Nicole that although her plan is great, by incorporating Cody's idea, the plan would be even greater. So have a think now about which conflicts you personally have when working in a team, and which conflicts between others you might be able to help with. Research into problems in teams has identified two related effects called risky shift and groupthink. Risky shift is the tendency for teams to choose more risky plans than individuals would have chosen. Groupthink is where teams start to all think alike and nobody questions the plan until afterwards. Let's have a quick look at why these happen and whether they matter and what can be done if they do. First, risky shift. I think it's fairly obvious why a team would tend to make more risky decisions, since nobody has individual accountability if the risk doesn't pan out. Also, the more cautious ones will probably be quieter and therefore have less of a say. Does it matter? Well, yes. Taking undue risks can have really bad consequences, so we must make sure that decisions are made properly and not by a gung-ho group. Always make sure that somebody's name is on every decision. Then there's groupthink. This is where the team all starts to think the same way. Ask yourself, in your company or organisation, do you have a cultural way of thinking that people maybe don't have when they first join, but which becomes the way you work, almost without you realising? Coupled with this is the tendency for people to keep quiet about possible problems because they don't want to appear negative or different. It's often the quiet ones who are the thinkers. But it's only afterwards that someone will say, actually, I was a bit worried about that. And when you say, well, why didn't you say anything? They say, well, you didn't ask. Annoying, but actually, why didn't you ask? Maybe you should have a system where, before you take action on something important and risky, you ask the quiet thinker types, can you see any snags with this plan, Mina? And then give them a chance to be heard. The author Edward de Bono has a variant of this, where he suggests that people take it in turns to be the negative one. He calls it wearing the black hat. The black hat wearer of the day has permission to be negative. It's okay, it's their job. And at every meeting, someone always has to be wearing the imaginary black hat. The final thought about this: what if you have a weak leader who isn't doing any of this? As a good team player, what should you do? I think the answer is that anybody can suggest that someone wears the black hat. Anybody can ask, hey Mina, you're good at spotting the flaws in the plans. Can you see any risk points in this one? Or even that we ask everyone in turn around the table, and each person has a chance to talk about the possible benefits and the possible risks of the plan. Something like that, so that nobody gets picked on, but you do get to hear from that quiet person. What's your team like at spotting the flaws in plans? Does your team become too confident and too risk-taking sometimes? Who in your team is good at spotting potential problems? Could you imagine asking them what they think of the plan? I think that would be an easy thing to do, and it could really make a difference. Being a good team player means making allowances for people who want to do things differently to you. But it also means doing what's best for the team, even if you have to get a bit unpopular at times. For example, if one of the others in your team isn't being a team player, then you should challenge them on that. Here are the 7 worst team behaviours, which should certainly be challenged if they're noticed by anyone, including you. Number 1 is selfishness, putting oneself before the team to the detriment of the team. This also includes not returning favours which others in the team have done for you, and this will rapidly lead to breakdown of the team. Second is unreliability, as in not keeping your promises to the others in the team, and not doing the things that you've agreed to do for the team. Keeping your promises is important in all of life, but most of all when the others in your team are relying on you. If you say you'll do something, then you must keep that promise to the team. This is the foundation of trust, which is what teams are all about. By the way, I'm saying you, and of course you should consider each of these and check that you're not doing them. But also call out anyone else who's doing any of them. Number 3 is aggressive behaviour towards other team members, and it's completely unacceptable. And so is a more common but more subtle version of it, which is passive-aggressive behaviour. This includes things like sulking, ignoring particular members of the team, keeping grudges, criticising others behind their backs, that kind of thing. 4th on my list is negative attitude about the situation or about other team members, and it includes gossip. If you really have to have negative thoughts, then keep them to yourself. Number 5 is dishonesty. Everyone in the team has to be completely honest with each other. That's a key foundation for a good team, and that includes not keeping quiet when you know something important. Number 6 is laziness, or not pulling your weight, not doing your fair share of the work. If you think someone is being lazy, initially ask them if they're okay and help them if they have a problem. But if it becomes a regular habit, then call them on it. And lastly, number 7 is lack of communication. Although some people are much more introverted than others, if you're part of a team, it's not okay to fail to participate, or to fail to reveal important information when it's needed. A good team needs everyone to speak up when necessary. Initially, help them by asking for their views, but if it persists, then call them on it. So I'd just like you to think about whether there are any people in your team who you ought to have pulled up on one of these behaviours, and you haven't been assertive enough to challenge. And also, maybe it'd be a good idea to ask yourself if there's one of the above that you are a little bit prone to. Maybe that could be a good resolution to reduce that tendency in yourself and become an even better team player. It's easy to find people irritating if they're different to you. And this might be a difference of, for example, the detail person versus the speedy one, the hurry-up person, or the harsh person versus the sympathetic type of person, or perhaps being an ideas generator versus an evaluator of other people's ideas. But actually, the person who's different to you is exactly the person you need in your team. The detail person needs the fast person, and the fast person needs the detail person. The key is to see them not as annoying, but as having just the skills that you need. Does the harsh person need a sympathetic person to work with? Well, sometimes, otherwise they can miss things. And does the sympathetic person need the harsh person? Well, yes, sometimes, to make those tough decisions. So, who do you find difficult? And can you change this perspective in your mind and see the benefit of that other person? Now, you'll find in the learning materials I've made for you a little chart, and you can list out who the person is, why you find them difficult, and perhaps, based on why you find them difficult, what strengths they have to contribute. For example, there might be someone you find difficult, and on reflection, it's because they're slow and pedantic. So in their strengths column, you could put good with detail. And the person you avoid because they're too pushy, always in a rush, making you feel under pressure. In their strengths column, you might put good at getting me to see the big picture, or good at getting groups to make decisions. This will help you to see the strengths of your team members, and maybe help you to use them in the right way and for the right situations. Now, just one more example. The person that's a bit sensitive, who gets upset easily. In their strengths column, you might put good at spotting when I've forgotten to consider others in my plan, or good at including the quieter team members in the planning process. So I'd just like you to download that form now, fill it in for some of your team members, and see what comes out of that. Really great teams have open communication. And I want to tell you about a model for this, which is known as the Johari window. The two guys who invented it were called Joe Luft and Harry Ingham, and they named it after themselves. So it's just Joe and Harry, which they made into Johari. So on the horizontal axis, we have what do you know about yourself? And then going down the page on the vertical axis, we have what others know about you. How much of the real you is known to others? Let's explore this part of the Johari window now, and we will cover the other parts later in this course. So if you think about it, how well do you know yourself? Now, since you live inside your head, you might at first assume that it's 100%. But let's do a little exercise. I want you to write down 3 words to describe yourself. So just do that now. Did you find that easy? Most people don't. And in fact, how can you know everything about yourself? You can't know how you would react in unknown situations. And then there's your future potential. But we'll come back to that in a minute. Now, what about what other people know about you? Would they guess the 3 words that you just wrote down. Just say out loud to me now, what percentage of the real you is known to your work colleagues? I find the answer to this varies from 10% to 90% when I ask this on training courses. So, is it okay to only reveal 10% of yourself to your colleagues? Is 90% too much? Is it good to reveal most or all of yourself? Well, Joe and Harry say yes. If a team's going to be great, everyone has to be open, completely open. Everybody's strengths need to be known so that they can be used. And everybody's weaknesses also need to be known so that they can be covered by the other team members. So this area of yourself that you haven't revealed, which is therefore known to you and not to other people, is known as what's behind your facade. And big facades are bad for team working. Ask yourself how you feel about people with big facades. You know that something is hidden behind that facade, but you don't know what it is, and that probably worries you. If they aren't being fully open with you, why should you be fully open with them? People with big facades find that most other people they deal with also have a large facade. It's not a good way to work. But it takes courage to reveal your true self. What if people don't like the real you? This fear is usually unfounded. They'll probably dislike your facade more. And in fact, you can only diminish yourself by having a facade. It's easy to hide bits, but it's very hard to add bits on that aren't really part of you. If you diminish yourself by hiding bits of yourself, you won't perform as well as you could do in your job. Be the real you. And by the way, it's a leader's job to set up an environment where people can be the real them. But what would happen if nobody had a facade? If everybody just told it like it is, would there be one big fight? Well, there's a country where people don't bother with facades and everything works just fine, and it's called Norway. I'm only exaggerating a little bit, and I'm allowed to because my mum's from there. But in Norway, if they like you, they'll tell you so. And if they don't like you, they'll also tell you. If they don't like the food you've cooked, they'll tell you. And if they want to know how much you earn or what sort of underwear you're wearing, they'll ask you. And it's brilliant because you don't waste time guessing and worrying about what other people think. And what do they think that you're thinking? Of course, when they meet someone from a high facade country like England or Japan, things get interesting. And you might feel, wrongly, that a Norwegian is being a bit rude or nosy, when really they're just being honest. So, a low facade team can work just fine. In fact, teams need to be low facade. Team members who buck the trend with a big facade need to be encouraged not to play that game. So ask yourself, could I reduce my facade a little bit? Could I reveal more of myself to my team? Self-knowledge is one of the keys to success in life, because without it, you won't be able to use your strengths and avoid being let down by your weaknesses. So a great step towards being a better team member is to ask for feedback. Previously, we've been looking at the Johari window, with its combination of what you know about yourself and what other people know about you. And we looked particularly at the facade, the part of you that you've decided to hide from others in your team. But what about the blind spot, the part that others can see, but you can't? Maybe they all think that you're boring or annoying, or maybe something good like clever, and you don't realize. So there can be good or bad things in your blind spot. Would you like to know what's in your blind spot? If I'd done some research amongst your friends and colleagues, and I could tell you. I hope you're thinking yes, because actually it would be great to hear the good stuff, and useful to hear about the bad stuff so that you could make changes. I think that fear of what's in the blind spot is usually worse than what's really there. So finding out would actually feel good. But it takes courage to reduce your facade and to show the real you, and it also takes courage to ask and find out what's in your blind spot. But in order to be a great team player, you need to do both of these. So if you disclose more of yourself and also seek feedback, then the area known by everybody, the arena, gets larger. And this is the effective working area that a team can use in order to perform well. If I've got a short temper, or I'm hopeless at detail, or I'm brilliant at coming up with new ideas under pressure, all these things need to be known by me and my teammates, don't they? Now, one final thought. If you reduce your facade and your blind spot, you'll not only enlarge the arena, but you'll also edge into the unknown. Is there anything that you don't know about yourself and nobody else knows about you either? And the answer is yes. This is really your unexplored potential. This is you as President of the USA or a famous author. You don't know you can do it, and nobody else knows you can do it, but actually you can. So we know it's a good idea in a team to reduce your facade, but now let's think about reducing your blind spot as well. How can you find out a bit more about what's in your blind spot? What do people really think about you? Who could you ask about yourself to find out your weaknesses and your strengths? And remember, you may have to look for clues in the answers. If someone says, you can maybe explain your plan a bit more clearly, then you're probably rubbish at communicating. Or if somebody says, you can maybe give them a bit more freedom in how they do their part of things, then you're probably a control freak. And you need to look carefully for those clues, because people don't often come right out and say what they think, especially if it's critical. If they actually do, then you should value it, rather than write them off as stupid or rude or wrong, which is sometimes a tempting option when we're being criticised. So promise that after this video, you'll take the courage to ask for feedback, so that you can then become the best you that you can be. An important aspect of being a great team player is to be supportive towards your colleagues. Some people find this more natural to do than others, and I must admit I tend to focus more on the task than on the other people. And under pressure, I might forget all about the people. But rather than leave it to someone else to support the others in the team, we should all do it. So I've been thinking about what it would take to be the nicest person ever. What do really great team players do with respect to their colleagues? And I think there are 3 quick wins that nice people do. And here they are. Thanking people, complimenting them, and offering to help them. So let's have a look. First, thanking your colleague when he or she has done something good. When were you last thanked? I ask people this on training courses, and quite often they say, not for a few months, or even never. It's free, it only takes a moment, and it's only good manners, and it makes a big difference. The second one was complimenting people if they're good at something or have done a really good job. This is certainly different to thanking, because it doesn't have to be anything they've done for you, just something they're doing well for the team. Third is offering to help. If you notice someone finding something difficult, or just being short of time, this takes more time than the other 2, but still, it could be just something small like carrying something up some stairs or drying up some coffee cups while you chat to someone in the kitchen. I saw an amazing video on YouTube where they did an experiment where a guy has a load of boxes on a trolley and he lets a part of them fall over in the street. And the passers-by all just make tutting noises as they step over his stuff which is in their way. And not a single person offers to help him pick it all up. Clearly they weren't a team at all. But do we sometimes do this in a smaller way, even within our own teams? Do we sometimes ignore the fact that someone is struggling because we have our own priorities to worry about? So when you're thinking about how to do more of this, you can do it by person. For each person that you know, have you done at least one of these? Think of Omar first. Have you thanked him or complimented him or helped him recently? What about Maria? And then you can also do it by focusing on my 3 activities. Can you thank someone today? Can you compliment someone today? Or offer to help someone today? But is this all a bit manipulative? Is thanking people just a game to make them think you're a nice person? Well, I would say that if you can make a conscious effort to genuinely thank or compliment people, and after a while it becomes a habit, then it's not false or manipulative. It's become part of you, and you've become a nicer person and a better team player. Again, I've made you a worksheet which you can download, and you can make a list of who they are and when you last thanked them, complimented them, or offered to help them. And maybe once you spot any glaring gaps, then you could make a plan for when you'll do it. Your final responsibility to your teammates is to forgive them when they underperform. Nobody's perfect and mistakes will happen, especially if people are pushing themselves and taking risks in order to strive to be great. So the thing is to realise that mistakes happen. It's not personal. Conflicts and problems can happen because people's personalities vary. And it's also because time is often short and communication's the first thing that gets reduced, when of course it's one of the most important. Maybe they didn't tell you about some part of the plan. Maybe you got left out. Maybe a decision was made when you weren't there. Maybe they weren't very diplomatic about telling you that your idea wasn't very good. These things will happen, and a good team player will let them go. Dragging around emotional baggage just slows you down. So as long as you can feel that what happened to you is just chance, and it's not going to be a habit, or that the process is being improved for next time, then you can let it go. If you really do feel unhappy about something, or you feel that it might be repeated, then it's fine to say how you feel, and check that a system is now in place to prevent a repeat. But generally, if it's probably just a one-off, and there were genuine reasons why it happened, it's best to just let it go. We all have a certain amount of personal baggage from our history, from the stuff that's upset us in the past, where we didn't get closure. But this shouldn't affect the team. So maybe think about, is the issue really with you and your personal baggage, rather than a real problem with the team? Tell yourself that the best result for the team is to keep everyone positive, rather than dwelling on small imperfections. In fact, the main person who suffers is the person carrying the baggage around, which is you. So I'd like you to ask yourself what has irritated you in teams recently, and whether it might actually feel good to forgive that person or forgive the team as a whole and move on. One vital duty of a great team member is to be reliable, to do what you've promised. So, this means being on time yourself to meetings and appointments, and also delivering work on time. And that's going to require being organised. In a classic team situation like a baseball or a football match, the action happens over a period of just an hour or two, with nothing else going on at the same time. So it's relatively easy to remember what you're supposed to do and to make sure that you get your contribution right. But work teams have to keep a track of lots of overlapping jobs over a longer time period. And maybe you're in a number of different teams all at the same time. So being organised is vital if you're not going to let down any of your teams. So you must get your time management systems right, which means writing everything down, keeping lists, always replying promptly to all messages, and keeping all appointments in your calendar that you check every day. Another aspect of reliability is emotional stability. The ideal team member would always be the same, not have different moods or even personalities depending on the situation, or perhaps from one day to the next. I've had bosses where you didn't know which one of their personalities you were going to get as you walked into work. And you don't want someone like that on your team. The ideal team player would always be the same and always remain calm under pressure. Now, you may well be thinking, well, I do vary, but I just can't help it. Or I do get a bit aggressive when I'm under pressure. That's just how I am. But these are just beliefs that you have about yourself that have become habits of behaviour, and they don't have to be true. Starting right now, you could say to yourself, I always remain calm under pressure, or I am the same helpful person every day, whatever else is going on around me. And you'll be surprised how quickly you can change your habits. So, summing up this section, I'd like you to ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, how organised are you? Should you write more down, for example? And number 2, are you always the same, or do you vary? Is this something that you could work on? At what point should you let the team down? Maybe the task has turned out to be harder than you thought, or maybe other things have come in as well, so it's hard to find the time. Maybe they've asked you to do an unfairly large share of the work. So how much should you put yourself out for the good of the team? How much time, effort, or risk should you put in order to help the others in the team? Well, logic would say that if the team only benefits a little bit and at very large cost to you, then you shouldn't do it. Whereas if it's only a small cost to you and it benefits the team a lot, then you should do it. And certainly in the second case, you'd be very selfish not to put yourself out a little bit if the team was to benefit substantially from your time or effort. But going back to that first case, where you have to put in a big effort in order for the team to only benefit a small amount, should you have to do this? Now, it seems to me that the team would be a bit unreasonable to ask this of you, and you'd be within your rights to at least question it. You could say something like, guys, do you realise how hard this is going to be for me to do? Maybe they didn't realise the cost to you, or maybe the benefit to them is bigger than you realise. So the conversation is definitely worth having. But if neither is the case, and the team is just being selfish and they don't really care about the cost to you, then maybe this isn't a team that you want to be in. But if it's marginal, or the cost to you is only a little bit larger than the gain to the team, then you should definitely do the work to show commitment, even though it may feel a bit unfair at the time. And no doubt you'll reap some kind of reward for your efforts in the end, perhaps with the team being more successful so everyone gains, including you. Or maybe just that other people appreciate you more and are more likely to help you when you really need it in the future. So a couple of things to think about. Do you ever put yourself out for the good of the team? Do you go beyond just your share? And could you do that more? And are you sometimes too soft? Would it be a good idea to check that the team realises how much work you're doing? Another responsibility that you have towards your fellow team members is not to drag them down by being negative. There's a big difference between speaking up when you've spotted a flaw in the plan and being negative about the work that needs to be done. When I was little, My brother developed a habit of saying, "Do we have to?" whenever anything was announced, even if it was something really good, like we're all going to the zoo. This dismal little voice would pipe up and say, "Do we have to?" Luckily, he grew out of that. And you may have seen the Scottish guy on the TV comedy show Dad's Army, whose catchphrase is, "We're doomed, we're all doomed." And it sounds extra good with the Scottish accent that I can't really do. But the point is that no team needs someone like that. And it's so easy at work to say, "Do we really need to come in on Saturday and run through the sales pitch yet again?" Or, "Oh no, not the timesheets again." So, 3 things you can do. First, monitor yourself to make sure that you remain positive, or at least you don't show it if you're feeling pessimistic. Second, make it a game to never say anything negative, even in the most testing situations. And third, get others to point it out if you do say anything negative. Maybe the whole team would like to play this game. Instead of putting money in a box for swearing, you could have a game where people have to put money into the box if they say anything negative. You'll be surprised how quickly not saying negative things translates into not even thinking negative things. And that's a habit that will then stay with you for life. Can you imagine the Brazilian or the German soccer team wandering onto the pitch, looking all miserable and mumbling, "Well, we'll probably lose, but let's get the game over with"? I think you'll agree that they'd be unlikely to win. So ask yourself how good you are at starting out positive and then maintaining positive thoughts and words when things get tough. Listening is a key skill when you're working with other people, and it's really underrated. We get taught how to talk and how to write, but not how to listen. It's just assumed that we all have this skill, but actually it's really hard to do, mainly because we can think faster than people talk. So while they're talking, we have some spare brain capacity left over, which we use to evaluate what the other person is saying. And before long, we're off thinking about whether we agree with them, why they're wrong, what they should be saying instead, and then suddenly we realise that we've missed a whole lot of what they've been saying. It requires a positive effort to just sit there and listen without judging, predicting, and planning a reply halfway through their sentence. But if you can become a good listener, it will bring you 3 significant team benefits. First, you'll be liked more by other people. If you listen to them, it makes them feel important and valued by you, so they will be more inclined to like you. Talking about yourself just gives the impression, probably true, that you think that you're more important than them, which is not a good start. So we all like people who allow us to have a conversation about our favourite subject, which is ourselves. That's the first benefit of being a good listener. The second benefit is that you learn more by being a listener. It's obvious when you think about it, that when you're talking about yourself, let's say you're talking about the holiday you've just been on, or how well your kids are doing at school, you're not learning anything about yourself at all. You're wasting your time, you're boring the other person, and you're making them more likely to dislike you. They don't want to hear about how great your kids are and how fantastic your holiday was, so don't tell them about your successes. And don't tell them about your problems either. Someone told me once that if you tell people about your problems, 70% of people don't care, and the other 30% are glad. I know it's just a joke, but it's kind of based on truth, isn't it? So if you're not going to talk about your successes or your problems, what does that leave you to talk about? The other person, of course. That's a much better plan. They will enjoy the conversation because they're talking about themselves, and they will like you more because of it, and you will learn some useful information. That holiday that they've been on, whether it was great or a disaster, might be useful for you to know about. The third and final benefit of being a good listener is a little bit surprising, and it's the fact that you control the conversation, not them. You might think that the person doing the talking is the one in control, but actually it's the one asking the questions and listening who steers the conversation with the questions they ask, including the occasional little linking question like, "And then what happened?" Or, "Tell me a bit more about that first part," or, "So what will you do differently next time?" So those are the three significant benefits you can get by being a great listener to the others in your team. Be liked, learn, and have control. So here's a fun exercise for you to do this evening when you're out with your friends. Make it a game to not talk about yourself at all. Just ask them questions and listen. And in the unlikely event that they ask you a question, just turn it back on them. For example, if they say, "So how are the kids?" Don't be tempted to go on about yours. Instead, you could just reply, "Yeah, they're fine. But tell me, how's little Tony? Is he still struggling in school?" You'll find this exercise amazing. It's so easy, and the other people love talking about themselves, and you will learn loads as well. Try it. Some people, like me, don't need much encouragement to talk, but others are more introverted and need it to be pulled out of them a bit. Often these quiet people are the listeners, the observers, the thinkers. They're the people who might spot the one vital flaw in your plan, so they can be the most important ones to find out about. A good team player will identify them and make sure that they're encouraged to make their valuable but reluctant contributions. I used to work in a manufacturing company with a friend called Clive, and he was very, very clever, but he was quite shy or maybe cautious, so in meetings he tended to say nothing at all. So the boss would be talking about some big problem, and everybody would be saying, "We don't know what to do." And afterwards, after the meeting, Clive would say to me, "Of course, Chris, what they should have done was X, Y, and Z." And I would say, "Well, why didn't you say that in the meeting, Clive?" And he'd say, "Well, I wasn't really sure, and, I didn't want to say anything." So I developed a little strategy when we were in the meetings together. So when the boss was saying, "We've got this problem," I would say, "Clive, what do you think?" And Clive would say, "Oh, well, I think maybe we could try this." And everybody would say, "That's brilliant. Yeah, let's do that." So every meeting, all I would do really was say, "Clive, what do you think?" And I would just kind of drop him in it. And I think to start with, he didn't like me doing it, but it worked really well. And he built up quite a reputation for being a clever guy who knew the answers. And I was really just his facilitator. So sometimes being a team player is just a case of encouraging somebody else to talk. It doesn't have to be difficult at all. So who do you know who has great ideas but doesn't always speak up when they should do? And could you involve them more when you're in meetings and group discussions? How much should you talk and how much should you listen? You've probably heard that thing about we have one mouth and two ears, so we should use them in that proportion. And that's a pretty good starting point. But I think it goes further than that. The more people there are, the less each one should talk. If you're on a team of 4, you should do about 25% of the talking maximum. Do you keep to that? Or after a meeting, do you walk away with your own voice ringing in your ears? Because if this is the case, then maybe you've overdone it. The ideal team player would speak up and do their share while deliberately trying to be a good listener and being really careful not to take up more than their share of the airtime, not too much talking and not too little. So if you're a naturally talkative person, I've got a little challenge for you, a game for you to play. In any meeting or whenever you're working with others in the team, even if there are only two of you, see if you can manage to only be talking for 10% of the time, so the others will be talking for 90%. It only takes 10% for you to make a brief comment and then ask the next question, and then you're listening to them again. Try this in the next meeting. It's a great habit to get into. And to help you listen rather than talk, the key is in the questions that you ask. We all know about open and closed questions. Open questions are things like why and how, and closed questions are ones that have a yes or a no answer. But the best questions of all are probing questions. Things like, tell me more about that, and why do you think that, and then what happened? A friend of mine has a great probing question he likes to use, which is, talk me through it. So if someone says they don't like their boss, for example, he'll say, oh really, talk me through it. And then he just sits back and listens, finding out all about the other person's situation. So in the next conversation or meeting that you find yourself in, try some probing questions and see how that helps you to be more of a listener, and see how much great information you end up discovering. There are so many things that need to be done within a team, and the team may only be 2 or 3 people, so everyone's going to have to contribute in a number of different ways. It's not going to be enough to say, well, that's what I do, and that's all I do. In fact, even your number one best skill, let's say it's keeping a track of all the details, might be someone else's number one best contribution as well. So you might not get to even do that. So flexibility of role is a useful feature in a team player, and it's worth being aware of this and trying to cultivate it in yourself. Basically, you start with knowing what you're best at, and then you also work out what your reserve choices are. Maybe you have 1 or 2 or even 3 other things that you can do well in a team. And then you can use your second or third choices if required. And you would do this consciously. You would think, I know I like to boss everyone around, but Louise is even more bossy than me, and she's a good person, so I'll let her lead, and I'll be one of the workers this time. Not easy sometimes. Just to give you a couple of examples. Clearly, leadership is something that you might let go of, even though it's your number one preferred role. Or you might need to step up to it, even though it's only third on your list, but there just isn't anyone else who wants to do it. Or you might decide to focus on coaching and helping the others, instead of leading them from the front. Or you might decide to help with idea generation, even though you don't normally choose that first. Or you might notice that nobody else is thinking about what might go wrong and do that. Or maybe nobody's paying attention to the detail, or the cost, or the time, or the project planning. So how flexible are you? Do you always have a favourite role in every team task? And what are your 2 or 3 reserve roles that you could use instead? In order to help you, there's a list of possible team roles in the exercise files that you can download and think about. My final action for you to be a great team player is to go the extra mile, to deliver more than you've promised. This might mean that you end up doing something that's great for the team but costs you a little, and that's really the essence of teamwork. Anyone who isn't prepared to put themselves out a little for the larger benefit of the team shouldn't be in that team. So deliver more than you've promised. All the best people and companies do this, and it should be an obsession in everything that you do in your life. Good enough is not good enough. The idea is to do whatever you do better and better every time, and better than what the other person is expecting. I've met people on training courses who say they just turn up for work in order to get paid, and they want to get away with doing the minimum. And I'm thinking, but that's really depressing. They're wasting 5 days a week of their whole life. If you've got to be there anyway, you might as well do the best you can and be proud of what you do. Do it for yourself as well as for the team. So thinking about yourself as a team player, how often do you go that extra mile? What did you do today that was better than it needed to be, and better than people expected? In what areas of your team role could you really excel? And what else can you do in the next few days to surprise your colleagues? Does laziness or modesty mean that sometimes you don't use your strengths to their best effect? Because once you know your strengths, then your duty as a great team member is to use them. Volunteer for anything that you can contribute towards. What are the challenges that your team is facing at the moment? And what strengths do you have that you can offer to help with these challenges? Also, looking at it the other way around, what are you good at? And when can you volunteer to do those things? If you find this question difficult, then there are a couple of things that you can do. First, you could ask your colleagues what you're best at contributing, and hope that there isn't a long silence as they scratch their chins. And also, have a look at my list of required team roles, which contains things that you might be good at, like organising, and that could be people or ideas, or pushing things along to get the job done quickly. Maybe being a networker, meeting new people, collecting new ideas. Maybe being the creative idea generator, or the reverse of that, thinking about what might go wrong with other people's plans. And maybe setting up systems or making sure that the detail gets done. These might be things that you don't normally step forward and offer to do. Perhaps there are things that make you feel a bit anxious, even though you're good at them. Or things that you don't feel that you're good at, but maybe you are. Or things that you don't like doing, even though you're good at them and the team needs them. Or maybe things that you don't do very often, but which you could be good at, given a little practice. So what I'd like you to do now is just think about that. Have a look at the list and pick one extra thing that you can volunteer to do for the team. It's important to understand yourself. But how can you get better at that? Asking for feedback is one way, and another way is to experiment. Try taking different roles within the team. Try doing work that you wouldn't normally do and see how you get on. Force yourself to come out of your comfort zone and do some things that you don't find easy, and you might surprise yourself. An interesting exercise that you can do is to give yourself a score out of 10 for the following 3 things. First, how much does your job require out of 10? So 10 would be that it stretches you to the limit, while 3 would be that it's easy to the point of being boring. Next is, what is your current performance level in that job? 10 would be performing to the max, while 3 or less would be on the brink of getting fired. And finally, how big is your comfort zone compared to all these? Are you performing above your comfort zone, or are you well within your comfort zone? So if your comfort zone is 8, and your current job and performance are both 5, then you're cruising, and maybe you ought to push yourself more. For example, you're comfortable presenting at large conferences, you're an 8, but your job only requires occasional presentations in sales meetings, so that's all you're doing. But if your comfort zone is 5, you're quite anxious about presenting, but your job and performance are both 8 and you're doing those big conference talks, then well done, you're really going for it. Try writing down those 3 numbers and thinking about yourself. Are you pushing yourself? Are you even pushing yourself too much? Are you learning and developing for the future? And what are the parts of your job that are stretching you, if any? And what parts of your potential are you not exploring? Do you at least have some parts of your job that take you out of your comfort zone? Maybe you hadn't thought of these as a good thing before, but I think you'll agree that they probably are. The more you learn, the better you can perform in the future, both for yourself and for whatever team you find yourself in. Knowing your weaknesses is just as important as knowing your strengths. In fact, maybe more important. To know and accept that you are, say, bad at detail or irritable when tired or too optimistic, whatever. And if everybody else in the team knows about these things as well as you knowing, that's really useful. Once you know your weaknesses, there are 3 options for you. And number 1 is to avoid situations where you'd need to use that skill. If you don't like detail or are impatient, then avoid that stock check meeting. And if you're not good at chatting with strangers, then avoid being on that exhibition stand. Option number 2 is to get cover from colleagues in the team. Maybe there are others who love sorting out those stock check details or love chatting to potential customers on the exhibition stand. And really, this is the essence of a team. And maybe you can do the same for them and help out in areas that they don't like, but which you find easy. The third option for your weaknesses is self-development. Or is it? Some people say it's a waste of time trying to teach a pig to sing. You'll never manage it, and all it does is annoy the pig. But as a trainer, I would say that you can learn anything you want to learn. Okay, you might not get to be the best in the world if you don't have a natural talent, but you can be good enough to get by. The question is whether you need to, if you've got a team of people who can do the things that you're bad at. So what do you think? Is it okay to say, I'm hopelessly disorganized, but my team members can do that bit? Or should you think instead, I'm going to learn about time management and get myself organized so that I can contribute even more to my team? I know which one I believe. And maybe that shy person who hates being on the exhibition stand will be more honest sounding than the chatty ones, and maybe the technical customer will relate to them more. Certainly, if you don't come out of your comfort zone, you don't even try self-development, then you won't ever know if you can learn it. But I do accept that there might be some things that are just genetically impossible for some people to change. In which case, okay, then the team can cover them for you. I think creativity might be one of these. Some people have it massively, and some people don't have much of it. It's just how it is. But I don't want this to be an excuse for laziness. If you've got a short temper, then learn to control it, because you can do that. And if you're nervous about doing presentations, then learn to do good ones, because you can. So I've got a fun job for you now, to complete my chart of weaknesses. Make a list of your main ones, and if you think you don't have any, then ask a good friend. And then for each one, list how you'll cover it. Will you avoid tasks that require it? Will you get someone else to cover for you so the weakness doesn't matter? Or will you develop yourself and get rid of that weakness? I want to leave you with my top 10 of team working. Practice and become great at these 10 things, and you'll make a more effective contribution, which will benefit you, your team, and your organisation. First, be a great listener. Ask people about themselves and really listen. Don't talk about yourself at all unless they ask you, probably twice. Next, trust people more. Give them the initial benefit of the doubt. Then, help the quiet ones to participate. Ask them for their views. They might be deep thinkers. Next, reveal a bit more about yourself than you normally would. So you reduce your facade and therefore your blind spot as others open up to you in return. Then ask for feedback and really take it on board. Next is to think about your weaknesses and get others to cover those for you. And then deliberately use your second or third preferred team role rather than always your top one. So don't always be the organiser or the critic or the carer. And then suggest that someone, maybe you sometimes, wears the black hat. This is the person whose job it is to think about what might go wrong. Otherwise, groups and teams are prone to over-optimism. Next is to appreciate difference. The people who annoy you are great for doing the things that you don't want to do. For example, the detail, the questioning, the worrying, the pushing for time, etc. And finally, eat with the others more often than you would have done. The best team bonding happens over food. So there we are. That's the end of this course on how to be a great team player. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you'd like to keep in contact with me, I'd be delighted to hear about how you get on. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn and add yourself to my free monthly email tips at chriscroft.com. Bye for now.